That's Enough Out of You podcast is sponsored by Todd John's Law. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people, whether it's the result of an auto accident caused by the carelessness of another driver or being charged with a crime. Dealing with the aftermath of a personal injury accident or being involved with the criminal justice system can be extremely difficult. That's why, whatever you're facing, you should never go it alone. You need an experienced attorney who will stand by you every step of the way. Todd is experienced, licensed, trusted, respected, and guaranteed. No one will work harder or more diligently on your behalf, and he will personally handle your case from beginning to end. Located on Drinker Street in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, Todd has been representing the legal rights of Scranton and Wilkes-Barre personal injury victims and those accused of a crime for over 20 years. At Todd John's Law, the utmost priority is ensuring that your rights are always protected and that your case is resolved as quickly and fairly as possible so that you can move on with your life. Call Todd John's Law at 570-876-6903. With Todd John's Law, you will receive equal justice under the law. All right, welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy? I'm excited for this episode, pal.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We have a great guest with us today. It is Mark Brennan, and he's a professor at Penn State, and he is the author of a book entitled Inba, the Empathy Book for Ireland, which he wrote with Cillian Murphy, which is pretty impressive. If you know who Cillian Murphy is, he's the star
Peaky Blinders, Oppenheimer, and don't forget he was also the Scarecrow in the Nolan Batman trilogy.
Right, that's right. But Peaky Blinders was a great series. So Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit about Mark, and then we'll introduce him and get started.
Well, Mark is a longtime friend, but he's also a professor and UNESCO chair in the Community Leadership and Youth Development at Penn State University, Director of Graduate Studies, Education, Development, and Community Engagement, co-founder of the Global Network of the UNESCO Chairs on Children, Youth, and Communities. His work has involved extensive research throughout Ireland, throughout the U.S., Europe, Africa, Asia, and Central and South America. I mean, that's an impressive resume. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Thanks for having me. And Bill, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks. All right, Sean, where do you want to start? There's so much to talk about.
Yeah, we got a lot to cover. I mean, we're gonna get deep into the troubles there in the north of Ireland. But Mark, let's start. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started in this, and if you want to discuss a little bit about the UNESCO chair, and then we'll get into the specifics of the book.
Yeah, sounds great. And it's great again to connect with you, Sean. We're old friends. I've got involved. It's probably been 20, 25 years. I've been doing work in Ireland, doing work elsewhere. A lot of it's been around community organizing and community development and how you get people involved and how you do everything from getting them to protest to get them to vote to everything else. And that's a lot of what I've been doing. That's a lot of the research and practice work I do, all that kind of stuff. But then maybe the last, how long it's been now? At least the last 20 years, I've been doing a lot of work with the University of Galway. And about 12 years ago, they got a UNESCO chair from an appointment from UNESCO. And the chairs are designed to be kind of think tanks for the UN. They're designed to be, people that are doing on-the-ground research and on-the-ground programs and funnel that into the UN so that best practices can get used. So there's a really, really good and dear friend, Pat Dolan, who's a UNESCO chair in Ireland. And we worked together for ages, and he was approached by UNESCO to get a chair. And then for our work, they came to me about 4 or 5 years later. And so we do all sorts of stuff. We've been doing, well, and again, like I said, my background's kind of community. His background is youth, children and youth. And I'm always looking to see who's missing from the table. Whenever we're organizing, we're doing whatever else. And young people are always a big missing piece of that. So the work we've been doing with the UN and others is really focused on that. How do you get them engaged and involved? And I guess the last thing I'll say was the really impressive but scary thing too is that we don't think of the world as being as young as it is, but half the planet's under 25. So this is, not only are they historically the ones who've been the change makers and doing good things, they're the ones we got to engage.
Right.
All the things they're doing. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. And we do everything from research to projects to teaching to setting up programs to helping the UN and others with policy, all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's great work you're doing, Mark. And, let's just get into a little bit in the north of Ireland. And
Yeah.
I wanted to start with a story. Over the summer, me and my brother and his wife and my mom, we were sitting at a restaurant in Tunkhannock, and all of a sudden these two SUVs pull up. And who gets out but Bill and Hillary Clinton? And so, of course, me and my brother go up to them, just like normal people. They're talking to everybody on the street. Of course, they have, Secret Service security with them. But my brother says to former President Clinton, he says, thanks for all that you did in Ireland, with helping with the peace process there and everything. And all of a sudden, Clinton just starts talking to me and Jamie like we're just three guys on the street. And we had like a good 10-minute conversation. And of course, his wife videotaped it. So it's up on our website now. But one of the things that President Clinton said that was interesting, he said that when they set up the peace process years ago, they set it up to protect the minorities then and the minorities now, because he knew that the demographics were going to change. Because if you looked at, the Irish Catholic Republican community, they were having 4 or 5 kids in a family, where the British Protestant Unionists were only having 1 kid. So they figured down the road the demographics were going to change. So my question to you now is, if there was a consensus now and a population check, and it was a legitimate check, do you think the Irish Catholic community would outpopulate the British Protestants in the north of Ireland?
Well, I think the demographics actually are at the point now where it's slightly higher. It's at least 50-50, but I think it's slightly higher now with
Right.
Catholic nationalists versus British Unionists. The other part of it too is, it's the demographic thing, but the other part is, big trend among the unionist loyalist community. A lot of the young people don't stay there; they go off to England or the continent or elsewhere.
Right.
So it's sort of like a double effect of demographics. But yeah, I think it's probably about 50-50 now, maybe a slightly bit more. And that's absolutely right with Clinton. I mean, that trend has been going for a long time, and I think as people looked at it over the years. I remember 20 years ago, even longer when the troubles were still going on.
Right.
They were saying all this would be decided not by, paramilitaries, not by politics, not by anything else, just by pure birth rate demographics.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into more on north of Ireland, I really want to get into it, but let's talk about your book, Mark.
Yeah.
First of all, talk about Cillian Murphy. What's he like?
What's Cillian like? Cillian's a lovely, lovely person. Great friend, great colleague. I mentioned the UNESCO Center in Galway, and probably about 10 or 12 years ago, again, Pat Dolan, the chair there, was at a celebration for the Druid Theatre in Galway. It's one of the oldest kind of active theatre companies in Ireland, and Cillian kind of got to start there, so he was there for it. This would have been before Peaky Blinders and stuff, but he was certainly well known and everything, and they hit it off dramatically, and then Cillian's idea was, this is about youth empowerment, this is about youth voice, this is about sustainability in lots of ways. If we're going to have strong communities, we can't just treat young people like adults in waiting and that kind of stuff. We got to prepare them now so they, magic doesn't happen when they turn 18 or 21 and they have to figure out how to be involved and active. We need to start doing it early. So he was really engaged in a lot of ways with that. And some of the early things we did, we've been doing some work where we train young people to be researchers. And that may sound boring, but it's actually them with complete autonomy to do whatever they want, to tell us the stories and the problems of their home places, and how to fix those. And more often than not, there are things that I would miss, or things that policymakers would miss, certainly things older adults would miss. And at the end of doing these projects, instead of doing boring research articles that no one ever reads, they do YouTube videos or podcasts or infographics, and Cillian narrates those for us. He's just been a tremendous advocate for the work we do, for all that stuff. And it's probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we started really kind of focusing on the area of empathy. And, again, empathy is, I'm not talking about giving out hugs and kisses. I'm not talking about touchy-feely. This is a core social emotional learning skill we need. The better leaders we have lots of it. You mentioned Clinton and others. There's a perfect example. Their ability to connect with people and understand people. Don't have to like them or love them. The idea is that you can connect with them and understand them. That's a tremendous skill. So we did that over the years, developed a program and everything else. That's been one of the big things that among others, that Killian really got into, and has just been a major advocate for it. And what we thought along the way was, I was kind of going by sort of like the Live Aid, or do they know it's Christmas, or We Are the World idea, or whatever else. So,
Right.
our idea was, we were sitting around and said, it'd be cool to have something tangible to show people what empathy is. It's a real abstract thing when you start mentioning it to people. And
Sure.
we thought maybe it could be a little bit of a fundraiser for the program. Maybe it could be, just something you can hand to people and say, here, this is what we're talking about. So, we started shaking the bushes. And, in the book, we had all kinds of people, from celebs to local kids with Down syndrome, to cab drivers, to guards. I mean, it was across the entire Irish spectrum of people. And he was just a driving force behind it. As soon as we kind of sat down and figured out what it was going to look like, he was as hands-on as the rest of us. But long story short, he's just a what you see is what you get with him. Just a lovely, lovely, sincere person.
Nice.
No ego, no crazy behavior, no nothing. He's just a good guy.
Wow.
Can't say much more than that. I mean, he's obviously incredibly talented and accomplished.
Yeah, definitely.
Stuff. But he's very chill, very sincere, and very word is his bond. Just a nice guy, kind of like we don't like. So yeah.
Well, Mark, congratulations on the book, because I read the book and it's tremendous. It's really a breakdown of 80 essays on empathy, and it's just really tremendous. And before we get into some of those essays, could you talk about the 3 types of empathy?
Yeah, and depending on who you talk to, there's there's a couple different types, but I even condense it down further into 2.
Okay.
A lot of times we talk about kind of cognitive empathy, which is where I can just understand where you're coming from and that sort of thing. But through a lot of our work, what we want to do is get into activated empathy, and that's when you stand up for somebody who's being bullied. That's when you stand up and clear the lane for people that need help.
Right.
That kind of stuff. And again, this isn't sympathy. This isn't me feeling bad for you. This is just me understanding where you're coming from, and doing what I can do as a good citizen, as a good fellow human being. And those are kind of the 2 big ones I kind of focus on. But there are other kind of strands of it that we can look at. There's ways that people exhibit it in different ways. Some of the research we've done, women exhibit it, girls and women exhibit it in a very different way than men and boys. We're kind of taught to be tough and everything else, and we find weird ways to exhibit empathy that might not be on the radar, but they are. So there's all kinds of strands to it, all kinds of aspects to it. But for me, the big ones there is just understanding it and practicing it. And it's weird too, like, as we were setting up these programs, or this program, sympathy education program, we did what all good program developers do. We looked around to see who else was doing it and tried to see what we could steal. And funny thing, we found 4 programs worldwide that teach empathy. 4 programs worldwide. And one of them was just not so good, just to be blunt. It's kind of touchy-feely sort of stuff. One was linked to religious organizations, so it was kind of like a religious sort of indoctrination thing. And then there was 2 others, and they were geared towards kindergarten kids. That was it.
Wow.
And it's sort of the idea that 3 of us, we're just great lads, and that's the way it is. And then there's bad people out there that aren't like us, and not the case at all. And the other cool stuff we've seen with the work is that empathy isn't something you're born with. It's something that grows and shrinks over time. There's actually a part of your brain that, like any other muscle, that grows and shrinks. You can reinvest in it. You can rebuild it. But the key thing is using it in practice, and that's cool.
Well, Mark, how do you explain empathy to people, let's say in the United States, who maybe they're not exposed to, the oppression that the Catholic community experienced in the north of Ireland, or say even the Palestinians are experiencing in Israel? How do you explain that to, say, an average American who doesn't understand what's really going on in those situations, and maybe they can't even begin to empathize because they just don't have an understanding of what's going on over there? How do you explain that to them?
Yeah, well, it's, I kind of always like to tell people that, the developing world and the conflict world exists right alongside of us. You can see tremendous oppression, tremendous poverty, everything else in rural Pennsylvania. You don't got to go to the other side of the planet.
That's true.
I mean, and it is, and you can see it in, one side of Scranton compared to the other.
You can see it in Scranton, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think just even more so, just being aware, just keeping your eyes open and trying to understand that, we're real quick to cast judgment. We're real quick to, point to people and decide why they're in a certain situation. And I think it's really important for us to, step back, kind of put ourselves in their shoes. What's it like to be in that setting? What got them there? What could have possibly happened to be there? What can we do to help them get out of it, or them to move on? I think the same as you start looking at places throughout the world, and obviously, Palestine, Ireland, you mentioned, been doing work in South
Africa,
other places. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of places to
no,
do this, and I think we're kind of good at putting things out of sight, out of mind, and I think our ability to kind of take some deep thinking and think about, okay, this, for not want of a miracle, that could be me. I could be in, I could have been born in one of these places, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And to try and understand it. And I think too, with places like this, I think empathy is even more important, trying to figure out both sides of the issue.
Right.
How do you understand somebody that you see as being on the opposite side, or whatever side you're
Right.
on? How do you do that? And I think, as we were talking about the troubles and other things, during the peace process, that was one of the key things that, George Mitchell and others did, was trying to build that empathy,
Right.
between people. And,
Well, Mark, how do you do that? How do you do that with the hardliners? Say the hardliners on either side who've been, they've been in war-torn country for so long. How do you get through to the people?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I mean, I think first of all, things that just kind of reinforce our common humanity. And I don't mean that as some touchy-feely academic type thing. I think of during the peace process, George Mitchell, and the story, Sean, but the deal was all these people that have been fighting each other for 40, 50, however long years before.
Right.
The one deal was they all had to have dinner together, and the only rule was they couldn't talk politics. So all of a sudden you had people like, Paisley and McGinnis, who, probably didn't like each other too much before then.
No.
Started talking about, within, no time, everybody's talking the same story. My kids are spending all my money. I hear you'd like to go fishing. Where do you go? Oh, really? I did that. How's that? What kind of, it's a lot harder to hate each other when you can empathize a little bit. And
Sure.
And the more we can do, just start sharing our stories. I mean, with each other. We may hate each other's guts right now, but we find out, here's the reason I'm so passionate. It's because, my parents and grandparents took me to these places, and we did these sort of things, and our culture was so important. And, and again, the key thing with empathy is, we don't got to hug and sing kumbaya and all kinds of stuff at the end of it. No, I just get it where you're from. You're not a monster anymore. I may not like you, but I understand where you're coming from.
Right.
And we're trying to, you can go to these war-torn places. We're trying to do it. We've got a couple of projects right now. How do we do this in American society? We're pretty divided. We're pretty distrustful of each other. We're pretty, whatever.
Extremely divided right now.
Oh, horribly so. And how do we get to the point where, we can talk again? How do we realize we're just fighting over minutia? We're not fighting over big issues.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me switch gears for just a second.
Can I jump in, Sean?
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, just to kind of relate this to everyday life, as far as empathy goes, I do training for a health insurance company for our customer service representative, and we did empathy training with them.
Yeah.
It was actually created for us by a woman who was a customer, who she was a member, and she lost her son. and she noticed that there were some representatives who were very good to her, and then there were some who treated her like a very in a very transactional manner.
Mhm.
And so she created this whole program, and we used it, and we trained our representatives, and as you said, Mark, it's such an important part of having empathy is being self-aware, and understanding that that you're understanding your role in the process of helping people. And the people that are calling our company are a lot of times going through awful situations with their health, and we have to kind of, as you said, put ourselves in their shoes, understand that if you just came from an appointment with a doctor, and the doctor told you that you have 6 months to live, and now you've got to call your health insurance company and find out what your benefits are. You don't want somebody to cry, and have, necessarily have sympathy. Obviously a little bit of sympathy isn't bad, but empathy is really the most important thing. You want somebody to be an advocate for you. You want somebody to, as you said, clear the way for you to get the things that you need. And that's really what a big part of that training was. And it was so important for us to, to explain that, to explain the difference between empathy and sympathy. So I just, again, just to relate that to something that we deal with every day, which is customer service. Sean and I constantly complain how customer service is dead in this country, but
It's awful.
I think if more people had that type of experience, had that type of training, and understood what empathy is, I think it would be a lot different.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's brilliant you point to that, Bill, because we're actually some of the increasing number of calls we're getting for empathy education is from the medical field and the law field. And I'm not talking trash on them, but you think about the way it was trained, as a doctor or as a surgeon, empathy or sympathy was almost a liability. You had to go on to the next surgery, and you had to have your head in the game completely.
I'm sure.
It's actually now it's believe it or not, like in the health and human development fields and stuff, there's actually research showing that patients with terminal outcomes, they actually have a better quality of life and even a little bit more longevity. Based on this, if doctors are more empathetic, if the insurance folks, if caseworkers, everybody else. And again, I'm not talking about going crazy, sitting there crying with you, but if they can just say, look, I can't even understand what you're going through, but we're gonna have you back as you get through it. Massively important, and big area. And the other thing I would just mention too is, when you actually look at sympathy is about us. I show sympathy to you because you're going through something that makes me feel better.
Right. Right.
Empathy is about you and
Yep.
And that kind of thing. So no, you're absolutely just spot on with that.
Yeah. All right,
Well,
Sean, go ahead. Go.
Yeah, when we were talking about the divide in America, Mark, and right now it's so bad that, if you're an actor or an athlete or a singer and you come out and you pick either political side, the other side basically trashes you, and all of a sudden you can't act. That's how divided it is right now. It's so bad. And I look at it and I don't see how we could ever bridge that divide. I think it's so divided right now. Change my mind on this. How do we bridge that divide and bring people together? Because it's really bad right now. And I think maybe it's just the hardliners on both sides, the extremists, but they're the loudest right now. And maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Now I do think these things kind of come in waves a little bit, I think. And if you look back maybe 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, a lot of these things are the core focus of our divisions now. We're just sort of bubbling, and there was nothing much to it, but they got amplified through social media and all the ways we can communicate and everything else. But I do think if you look at some of the the most vocal kind of extremes of the spectrum on both sides, they tend to be older. They tend to be a lot of different things. Keep in mind, like I was saying, we've got 52% of the planet under 25.
Right.
Those of us over 25 are being rotated out quick. Hopefully a long time, but a lot of the young people just have no time for this stuff.
Right.
And I think that's going to be part of the game changer of it. I also think too, it's just I think we're still coming to terms with like all our technology and everything else. It's so easy now just to self-select yourself into the smallest, tiniest box echo chamber.
Absolutely.
And that just reinforces everything. So I think there's a need for lots of us, and like you guys, the work you're doing here is just brilliant. I think there's a need to, get the different voices out there and say, yeah, it's wonderful if we don't agree on things, cool. But you're still okay. You're still part of the tribe. You're still part of whatever, and this is good.
Right.
Not everything's all or nothing. And I think we also kind of have to kind of refocus the message that this isn't a zero-sum game. Just because some people are advancing in life doesn't mean it's taking away from yours. And I think young people are good at pointing that out as well. But I think that's part of it. But I think biggest thing for me, it comes down to kind of real substantive interaction with people. It's way too easy to hate someone you never met and you see on the other end of it.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's yeah.
Social media is such an influence on that right now, and it's so easy to to criticize or fight or get nasty with somebody who you've never met, who you never will see face to face. You're on your computer, you're on your phone. It's very easy to do that, and I think we also tend to exaggerate what we see on social media. We may see a post, and there may be 3 or 4. There may be hundreds of comments, and we see 3 or 4 extreme, views. And then we walk away and say, oh, geez, everybody's saying this now. And it's just not the case. I think, like Sean said, that it's the the extreme views, the extremists right now who are the loudest. And I think the silent majority are, the folks that are going to decide the things that happen in the future. But, we have to realize that we have a lot more in common than we think.
Mm-hmm.
And the views of those extreme folks don't necessarily represent everybody on that side. And I think the more we understand that, hey, I'm more like you than you think. And we can come together and we can do what's best for this country. Because we really are in crisis mode right now. I feel like we're headed down just a terrible path, and we really need to kind of take a step back, refocus, look around, and look to see who can we help, not who can we hate.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree completely. And part of it too is like we gotta not be caught up in all these people we've never met and never will meet, and whatever Trump, Biden, whoever, says or does today, these are people I'm probably not ever going to meet. I'm not ever going to, unless I'm Sean Kane, because he hangs out with the Clintons and others, But, it's one of those things, like most of my life is probably the 100 people I encounter every day in my local community and everything else. And that's 99% of my existence. And to get caught up in all this craziness of people that I'm never going to know, never going to meet, never going to know, it's just, it's not good for me. So yeah.
So Mark, let's talk about some of the essays in the book, and let's start with yours because yours was fascinating. You called it the Empathy for the Devil, and it was your experience with the nuns in school. And it was just fascinating read. Could you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It was my I don't know, that was my therapy session or something. I don't know. I grew up Catholic school, all that kind of stuff. Small town where probably everything revolved around priests and nuns and that kind of stuff. And
same here.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just don't think I don't think we were ever on the same page. Now that went through school and everything was what it was. It was fine, but but I wasn't particularly fond of them. I wasn't particularly, I saw them as kind of elitist. I saw them as kind of mean-spirited. I saw them as other things. Probably some fault in my judgment as well. I'm not putting all on them. But then interesting thing happened is, I got to work at a university where there were a lot of nuns. I guess I was a glutton for punishment or something. But one of the first gigs I got was that, and I found out there was a lot deeper story to things. There were certain ones that were everything that we should all aspire to be. They were truly godly, inspired, whatever human beings. They were like Gandhi with habits. They were just, they were good people doing good things for the sake of doing good things, not because religion said to or anything else. And then there was the bigger chunk of them was kind of indifferent, and I remember them as being indifferent even, as a young person. I remember them being sort of distant and, not necessarily sticking up for people, which is sort of there. And then there was some that were just truly, the devils. They were bad, bad eggs. They were damaged goods. They were whatever. And they, much like we've seen in other settings, priests and lots of other non-religious settings, people that like to torment children actually find go out of their way to find a calling and find a place. And, they're pretty bad. But actually, as I got working with someone, I ran into a few of the old ones. And, because we were in a small place and we were working together a lot, some of the ones I would encounter, we'd have coffee together. Occasionally there'd be an event, we'd have a glass of wine or a whiskey or something like that, start telling stories. And they told really different, not really different takes on things, but they provided a lot of depth and insight that I really never thought about. Like a lot of them, didn't see an option when they were young, and this was like a thing that they would be applauded for. They were going into the convent, and wasn't that great? And the families were proud and everything else. And then they got there and realized it wasn't what they thought, and they really thought, I'm a young person now. Technically I can get out, but if I do, it's shame on me and my family. I'm stuck. Other ones, realized like that they thought getting into it would be, an area where they could kind of make a difference. And I had one of them say to me, and what I found when I was 22, she said, I was sent to a kind of remote rural outpost and away from family and everything else. And then that was my life for 5 years. And that was really, really tough, disheartening. And then there was others, that were LGBTQ plus, and back in the 60s, 70s, whenever, coming out wasn't like it is today. And even then, this was safe haven. This was something where you could go and join the nuns, and all of a sudden, no one was asking you why you were 25 and not married, and why you, So there was just a lot of depth to it, and I understood them a lot more once I actually took the active step to put myself in their shoes and figure out a little bit of what was going on with them. Truth be told, when you consider all that, I don't know if I would have been much better than them. And that's what that stuff's about.
And we will be right back. We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, Residence Inn by Marriott in Scranton. Discover comfort and convenience in Scranton. If you're planning a short or extended stay in the Scranton, Pennsylvania area, Residence Inn by Marriott, located at 947 Viewmont Drive, will ensure your stay is nothing short of exceptional. Their friendly team is committed to providing you with top-notch service and a memorable experience. Whether you're in town for business, leisure, or a bit of both, Residence Inn Scranton has you covered. They offer free Wi-Fi, an indoor pool, meeting and event space, complimentary hot breakfast, a fitness center, and an on-site market. And Residence Inn Scranton is pet-friendly. Your home away from home. Residence Inn Scranton features spacious studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom suites, and all are complete with a fully equipped kitchen. There's a cozy fireplace lounge and an outdoor barbecue area. Call 570-343-5121 or go to Marriott.com for more information. Residence Inn Scranton, where hospitality meets home. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Fairfield Inn by Marriott. Located at 949 Viewmont Drive in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Fairfield Inn Scranton exemplifies travel made easy. They offer stylish guest rooms with plush bedding, complimentary hot breakfast with healthy options, one of the area's premier hotel fitness centers, as well as nearby dining options. While you're staying at Fairfield Scranton, make sure you check out some local attractions like the Scranton Cultural Center, the Electric City Trolley Museum, Montage Mountain Resorts, and the Steamtown National Historic Site. Catch a Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins game or a concert at the Mohegan Sun Arena, or take the historic Lackawanna Coal Mine tour. Fairfield Inn Scranton is in the center of it all. Experience comfort and convenience in Scranton at the Fairfield Inn by Marriott. Call 570-343-5121 or go to Marriott.com for more information. Fairfield in Scranton, where hospitality meets home.
Well, I can tell you, Mark, if I was going to write an essay for your book, and it'd probably be cut out, but
Nope.
if I was going to write one, it would be my empathy for Yankee fans, because and Billy knows this, as a diehard Red Sox fan, and Mark, you know this, I disdain Yankees and their fan base, and it crushed them over the years. But the last 6 years, I've been helping to raise a kid who's like a son to me, who's a diehard Yankee fan. So I empathize now with the Yankee fans, and the fact that he was born, right after the Yankees won their last championship. He's never got to see a World Series, even though they keep talking about 27 world titles, but he's never seen them. So I empathize with that. And if the Yankees did win a World Series, it wouldn't affect me the way it would have, say, 15, 20 years ago, when I would have been, me and Billy probably wouldn't have talked for a week, because he's a Yankee fan. So I understand that. And Bill, what would you write an essay on empathy for?
Oh, geez. Put me on the spot, Sean.
Well, we could come back to it, Billy.
Yeah, let's come back to it. Yeah.
Mark, talk about some of the other essays in the book that intrigued you.
Oh yeah, I mean, and Billy, I kind of struggled forever trying to figure out something to talk about. I mean, there was lots of people in my life that I think have been important at turning points and stuff, but somehow came back to the nuns when push came to shove. But no, I mean, some of the other ones were, oh my God, there was just some of them were just amazing stories of people. And again, like I said, there's one guy, Michael Cairns, he has Down syndrome, he's about 30, he lives in Galway. Wrote a wonderful essay on what it is. There was some people that had some mental health issues that wrote just beautiful things about how they've navigated their lives. There's a great one by a guy named Tyrion Henry. His wife, she passed away a couple of years ago, but he wrote this essay about her. When she was like 16, she went to the hospital with a stomach ache, and they found out she had just massive amounts of cancer. They took out half of her stomach, a lot, I mean, just crazy. And the doctor said, in the title of the book chapter, and the doctor came from a doctor that said to her, when they discharge her, we just have no idea what's next. And instead of like having this kind of hanging over her head forever, she just went and lived life, went on, got married, had kids, was incredibly active, was a force to be reckoned with, and lived a long, long life. And then unfortunately had a recurrence and other things, but just beautiful story about her. And Sean, a good story with it, and Billy, when she was in the hospital when she was 16, the doctor said to her, oh, hey, Bono's here. Do you want to have him come in and visit you? And she said, no, actually, really, could you get David Coverdale or somebody else? Oh,
that's great.
That was even more brilliant, I thought. But no, there was them. There was, this colleague and dear friend of mine, Pat Dolan. He wrote about going to school with the Christian Brothers, and it also gives me no grounds whatsoever to talk about tough nuns. Christian Brothers are a nasty bunch,
Right.
And very nasty bunch, evil bunch. He wrote a wonderful essay about one of them that wasn't. I'm trying to think. I mean, there was. I think there's so many of them. They were all so good. Which one do you like, Sean?
Well, yours was top of the list. Yours was tremendous. But there was just so many different ones. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm just trying to think. I mean, there was you mentioned the Down syndrome. That was tremendous. I mean, it was just, the Cillian Murphy, his, I mean, it's just so interesting to me to try to, to understand and empathize with something that, is so opposite of what I grew up with, or,
Yeah.
how do you empathize with something that, is inherently evil, though? Like, how do you empathize with, say, the Ku Klux Klan or the Nazi Party, or something that, is like, how?
Yeah, no, again, this isn't about liking them.
Right.
I've got to know how Germany in a 20-year span got up to its neck in 2 world wars. How normal people, and that's one of the things that all the evidence shows. All the normal people that did all the atrocities were normal people. They weren't psychopaths. You can't control psychopaths. You know, if I pick all the psychopaths that want to just kill, 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 and have on my team,
Right.
they're going to kill me. I need people that, you know, are normal, logical people thinking they're doing what they're doing. And for me to understand that sort of thing, I mean, we're actually, it's funny you bring it up, but we're doing some work now with linking empathy education with Holocaust education. And I got to go to tremendous honor. It was massively deep and heavy to go to Auschwitz this last fall and look at things. And again, it was incredibly. I want to know why normal, not hateful or anything. Normal citizens were able to do something so horrible, and how it was just so, you know, how routine it became, and how, you know, institutionalized it became, and how, you know, it wasn't even brainwashing. It was just, you know, it's different things. I mean, I want to understand that. I want to, if we're going to avoid that again, we got to understand what was the thing that pushed people over the edge. What was the process that got them there?
Right.
And these weren't, they did horrible things, but these weren't your idea of evil. They did evil things, but I want to crack that nut. I want to figure out what was going on there. So that's how I take it. I don't feel for them. I don't condone or acknowledge or anything what they did, but I got to understand it. And actually, the understanding of it is a lot more deeper than just saying, "Ah, they were bad people." So that's, I mean, that's kind of how I kind of approach it. You know, and again, I'm not making the case for any of them, but if you look at other similar groups, you know, what moves a young person? You know, I don't think we're born with any of this stuff. What moves them along the path that they join the Klan or they join something else? What that doesn't happen naturally. There's a process, and we're going to kind of cut down on that stuff. We're going to try and eliminate that sort of stuff. We got to figure it out.
You know, getting back to you know, one of the essays that I really enjoyed in the book was Cillian Murphy's. You know, how he talked about, you know, his job as an actor, and, you know, as a father, and, you know, how acting basically is listening.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big, you know, that's a huge part of being able to empathize. If you could just listen and just listen to the other side, and then you might have a better understanding of it. So that essay I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think he was really spot on with that. And, you know, no matter how much we like to pretend, trust me, I'm bad at it. You know, we're not really present in the moment with things. I mean, look at the three of us here talking like we're old friends and everything else, having a great time. But as I answer something, you're looking and saying, "Okay, what's the next question?" As you're asking me something, I'm thinking, "What's the next thing?" We're not listening to each other enough. We're not connected. And Sean, just in the context thing, there's one other essay that did pop into my head. Just to mention quick, it was by Alan and Elaine Smith. And Alan was he just retired a couple of years ago. He was the UNESCO chair in Derry, outside of Derry. He lives in Belfast. Grew up in Belfast. Came from a very strong unionist Protestant background. You know, his grandfather, I think, was one of the key members of the Orange Order, and his wife came from Andersontown, which is where the neighborhood where Bobby Sands was from. And the two of them walked into a coffee shop one day at Queen's University and was love at first sight. And
wow.
Yeah, and they at first, you know, I said to them, "Come on, write something to be great," you know. And at first they were like, "Oh, you want some silly, soppy nonsense about love across the barricades and all this kind of stuff." And I said, "No, just tell me, like, you know, what it is." And they just wrote almost like a poem that just said, you know, "Here's how I've learned to understand your culture, and you've learned to understand mine, and here's what we do, and we've been together for 40 some years, have a bunch of kids, some grandkids." But their story was pretty amazing, though. I mean, they fell in love and decided to get married, and the unionist said, "You know, we won't give you any of our halls to get married in." And the IRA said, "You get married in ours, we'll blow it up." So much so, they actually went to Mozambique and South Africa and taught English and stuff for a bunch of years, and then came back and were really active in the peace process. But you know, that was a really good one for me. I liked that one. There was a couple iterations of it that I think were as beautiful, if not more. But that was a big one.
Yeah. And Billy, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off before, buddy.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I just getting back to what you're saying, Mark, about, trying to understand how people go from, being just normal people to, to doing things that, sometimes are horrible or, you know, can be perceived as evil. I think education is such an important part of, of our lives. And it's so lacking, in so many areas of our country. We just don't focus enough funding, enough attention, enough, we just don't give it the respect and we don't give our teachers what they deserve. It just doesn't pay to be an educator these days. It's not worth it. And it's, you can see we're suffering as a result. We have people who, young people who are, coming into the workforce who understand absolutely nothing about, who came before them and who built this country and how we did it. And it's, the lack of understanding, the fear, I think, of different people, or people who are perceived as different. That person's trans. Well, I don't know. I've never seen a trans person. I don't know anything about that. I don't understand that. So, what's my first reaction? Maybe that's, if you don't pursue, education, if you don't want to understand, if you don't have that knowledge, if you don't want to if you don't have that curiosity to pursue that and to try to understand other people, to try to understand different cultures and different different ways of life, things of that nature, then you're predisposed to being afraid of them. And as Yoda says, fear leads to hate. And I think that's what is happening now. It's just so important that we really have to look at our education system and have to make major changes, because we will not be able to sustain the way that it is today. We just won't. We're not going to have enough teachers. We're not going to have the funding that we need. Everything is going to end up eventually, where the kids who are getting the better educations are, the wealthy, and the poor kids and the middle class kids are going to be forgotten about. And I think that's horrible. I think we pay entertainers and athletes millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, and teachers get almost nothing. And they're the ones that are doing such important work. For me, it's a passion. It's something that I care deeply about. I just wonder what you think about that, Mark.
No, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of thoughts as you were talking there. I mean, I think, one of the things, I forget what our ranking is in the world, but in terms of our educational spending, in terms of our educational attainment, everything else, most prosperous country in the world and everything else, I think we're down in the 20s or 30s or something. I mean, it's not even close,
Yeah.
There's also, I think the idea that, education has become to be something as a burden. I got to go through this before I can move on with my life. I mean, think about our grandparents, though, or great grandparents or others that we grew up with. God, if you had an education, you had a world ahead of you. It was a fundamental shift in things.
Yeah.
The other thing that, I think is really interesting is the UN development program, UNDP, did a big study a couple of years ago, and they pulled in some of the best minds in learning and all sorts of stuff to figure out, what do we need going forward in this new century, but beyond that. The one thing they came out with is that we're failing ourselves by providing, you go to high school or college or wherever, and you get this narrow set of job skills that just prepare you to go in and work like a cog in a machine. They said if we don't invest and start including things like social emotional learning, empathy, critical thinking, all that stuff, we're going to believe everything we're told. We're not going to look out for each other. We're not going to be, good citizens. But on the bigger part too, any of the innovation we have is going to cease.
Right.
People like Steve Jobs and others. You need that social emotional leadership to actually think about what's the next great thing.
Right.
And I think we're starting to see little bits of it. And then last thing I'll say, Billy, you're absolutely right. And I love sports as much as the two of you. Maybe not as much as Sean, but at least the two of you. And there's some cool historical stuff that's kind of scary, but I read a book a couple of years ago, and they said one of the great turning points of most empires was when they started doing things just to keep the masses busy. So the Romans started building the Colosseums and all this sort of stuff, and they stopped promoting philosophy and history and literacy and learning, and it was just to keep everybody happy. And that almost always they said that's one of the defining moments of when an empire or civilization takes a downturn. And I'm thinking like the Rams Stadium in LA, what was it, $1.5 billion to build? I mean, my God, I'm not, hey, I'll watch the games, I'll go to them. I'm not being some precious prima donna here, but yeah, maybe our priorities are a little out of whack.
Yep. I agree.
Well, Mark, let's get into the north of Ireland. You're doing some great work there. Let's talk about the work you're doing with the youth there.
Yeah, doing a lot of things. And I've been doing a lot of things over the last, I don't know, 20 years or so. We do a lot of work with a group called Feroiga. It's they're kind of like if they're based in the Republic, but they do a lot of work in Northern Ireland. They're kind of the national youth organization. So it's like if 4-H and the United Way had a baby. That's kind of what they are. But it's like 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 every Irish young person is a member, has been a member, and fantastic organization. Very good friend of ours, Sean Campbell, is the CEO, and it's all focusing on multiple levels of youth development. It's youth skills, social emotional stuff, but it's also youth driven. So they've been doing a lot of work in Northern Ireland as well. And Sean, like, it's a funny thing. I've seen it over the last, since before and after the peace process. Young people there, they're pretty much, their mindset and their way of dealing with things, it's not really about conflict anymore. They realize they're both in the same boat. The Northern Ireland economy is not great. Brexit sold out everyone across the board. Your background had no basis in that. And I think they're all in the same mind that there's limited opportunities, there's this thing, that is one of the commonalities they have. But there's also, as with young people, which is the coolest part about the job I have, is there's a sense of optimism. There's a sense of moving on from, the baggage of the past. There's a sense of moving on to be creative and other things. And then sure, there's still, Northern Ireland is still incredibly segregated society. I mean, over the Troubles, everybody of each persuasion moved into their own little clusters. So, I mean, going back to the community stuff, we talked about interaction and stuff, if you're Catholic, you probably don't have many Protestant neighbors. You might have some friends, you might have some other stuff. If you're Protestant, you probably don't have any next door neighbors. It's become very polarized in that way. And then the other thing is there's schools, as we're talking about schools and things. I mentioned Alan Smith, and Alan's whole work is around shared education. But right now, believe it or not, 90% of all young people in Northern Ireland go to segregated schools. 90%.
Wow.
So how do you start developing and building connections?
Right.
When you have almost no exposure to them until you're 18 or 20 or whatever,
Wow.
But the good thing, most of the fights I see tend to be over whether, Glasgow beat Celtic or whatever, or Rangers.
Celtic beat Rangers, yeah.
Yeah. Those are what the fights are about, not political ideology and stuff. That's pretty cool. I wish we could get back to the point where, we could fight over the Red Sox and the Yankees. We've lost the ability to do that. Those were the good old days. So, I think on the positive side with young people, they're very innovative and creative. And I think they also realize the uniqueness of place and the things you can build on. And, you mentioned Northern Ireland to people and they think, oh, bombing, shootings, everything else. No, they don't think Game of Thrones. They don't think,
right, exactly.
They don't think, oh, this it's like an entertainment hub. They don't think about these things. So I think working with them to, be innovative, creative, entrepreneurial, these kind of things. And again, they're much more happier to work together than we think. People of different backgrounds and other stuff. Certainly, probably more so than their parents.
Right. And that's interesting, Mark, because, and we did a couple episodes on Ireland, and the thing that you mentioned there that kind of hit me is before it was always, you had the one community that was oppressed. The Catholic community was oppressed for years and years and years. And now you're talking about the economy as a whole is so bad that everybody's in the same boat. And I think that's how you could reach young people. But let me ask you this. Do you think in our lifetime, do you think we're ever going to see a united Ireland? And do you think that's a course that would kind of right the ship? Or do you think that's a course that you don't think we're going to be able to achieve in this lifetime, our lifetime anyway?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really good question. And, as it's always been a very complicated and complex question.
Sure.
I think if we follow like the stuff we started with, like just the demographic shift, yeah, eventually that would probably lead to enough votes for a referendum to carry. But that's also assuming that 100% of Catholics, for example, would vote for it, and
right,
100% of Protestants would vote against it.
Right.
No, I think a lot of people, and I've talked to many people over the years of different backgrounds and stuff, and I know many people who would be from a nationalist Catholic background, would say, practice, it really doesn't matter to me one way or the other. It's a nice idea and everything else, but really, my government pensions with the British government, my this, that, and the other, day-to-day things doesn't really change much. And I've talked to many people, of loyalist and unionist backgrounds that said, yeah, actually, I could picture being part of it. I might not be thrilled with the idea of it because I consider myself British. My family's been British, but
Right.
they really screwed us with Brexit, and I can't tell you how many loyalists I know that have an Irish passport, just for the simple sake that it's now much easier to travel to Spain for holidays. If I want to buy an apartment in Italy, I can do that, and I can't do that as a British citizen. So I think there's those kind of weird complexities. I think part of it'll be economics too.
Right.
I think right now, both Britain and Ireland are sort of, their economies are doing fine, but they're kind of a little flat. So it's not like people are losing all their money being part of the pound system and paying everything
Right.
and think it's better to jump to Ireland. So I don't know. I think, I think it's a really complicated thing. And I also, and the last thing I'll say, I know I've met a lot of people on both sides. I don't even like saying sides, but both communities, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
that have said, we lived through the Troubles for 25 years, 30 years. I don't care what you call us right now. I don't care what our passport is. I just like that we're not in the midst of all that anymore. And hey, my kids are growing up safe and happy. That's cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's going to be a very interesting thing. I mean, I think there's lots of talk that within the next 5 years or so there might be a call for a referendum. I don't think it's nearly as certain on either side as you would think, and either side of what politicians and others are saying. I don't know. It's very.
Do you think the 6 counties being independent of both the Republic of Ireland and Britain is an option, or no? Not sustainable?
I don't know how you do that. I mean, it's
Right.
it's people always kind of raise that and that sort of thing. I don't know how that would work. I mean, all of a sudden you'd have to have a new country with a new military with everything else, and you're only talking about 2 million people, or 1.5 million people. And
Sure.
And how do you organize trade? It just seems like it would be this, be crazy. What I would envision actually is like maybe a vote on it, and people say, okay, yeah, we're going to unite. We're not going to do it for 40 years, and then we all just learn to live with each other for a while, and we all
Okay.
any of the I think that's probably wishful thinking too, but I don't know. I mean, there's really strong cases for it in terms of people kind of use the example of when the two parts of Germany united, in the 90s. There is a lot of things that could be worked out, and it might actually be economically or healthcare and stuff like that
Right.
better. But, you know, there's also the case, the other side of the case too, that, you know, being allied to, you know, allied to the British economic system and stuff might be more sustainable in the long term. But I think, you know, I think it could go either way. But I also don't think people care that much,
Okay.
which is crazy to think about.
Wow.
We've always talked about it forever. Yeah, there's certain people on both extremes that would say, oh, we must be one or the other. The vast majority of people I find are in the middle, are just saying, hey, as long as we're not killing ourselves and bombing ourselves and doing all these things, you know, it's all good. I believe what I believe, and that's between me and my family.
And we will be right back. DK's Corner, located on 802 East Lackawanna Avenue in Oliphant, Pennsylvania. Visit DK's Corner for hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, and delicious breakfast, including breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos. And take it from me, the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. Check out DK's Corner, Oliphant's little hoagie shop. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. That's DK's Corner in Oliphant, Pennsylvania. And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, you know, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, if we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides. So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh my, they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you know, you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, you know, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. I mean, again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you. And one of the things you mentioned there, you know, when you talk about, you know, the Unionists consider themselves British, I mean, that's part of the problem with colonialism, you know, because try to explain the situation to people over here in America that, you know, they're not Irish heritage or whatever, and they just don't have an interest in it, to try to explain to them that, you know, the Irish Catholic community, the Catholic community considers themselves Irish. And if I've been to the north of Ireland, and you see in the communities, you see the Irish flag hanging. But then if you go into the Unionist communities, you'll see the Union Jack flag, because the Unionists, you know, their ethnicity for the most part is either from Scotland or Wales or England for the most part, and they consider themselves British. So they don't get into the Irish culture, you know, and the Irish consider them, the Catholics consider themselves Irish. So that's always, I try to explain that to people, and all they see is, you know, Irish Protestants fighting Irish Catholics. If they don't understand the situation, they don't understand the evils of colonialism, and this has been 800 years of oppression. And it's also interesting now that you're saying that a lot of the people there, you know, for all these years of combat, you know, it's not that they just want it stopped, and they don't want, you know, it's not that, you know, it's not about United Ireland right now. It's more about, you know, just stopping the violence. And do you think that's more of the youth movement? Like, you talk about in your work, you talked about loss of memory harm.
Mhm.
And do you think that's a big part of it? Because a lot of these young people don't, you know, they've been born before the troubles, really. They don't understand the violence, and they, you know, they don't have that hardline, you know,
Yeah.
background.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, that's a brilliant question, Sean. That's really, really, you know, absolutely spot on. And, you know, going back to the previous thing, like, you know, there's some people who would say that, you know, the Unionists and others are more Irish than the Irish themselves. They've taken on like you know, like most cultures that merge with each other. They brought
Right.
on, they've taken on the best of the Irish culture, and the Irish have taken on some of the best of theirs. And like,
Yeah, right.
and it's, you know, and again, it's a celebration of our backgrounds, our heritage, everything. And I think the more we understand that and embrace that, that's a cool thing. But you're right with the young people. This is something, and something I've seen in the Republic more than I've seen in the North. I think in the North, people's parents, certainly, you know, grandparents, but certainly parents, would remember what the troubles were like. You know, you know,
Sure.
they remember very clearly what it was like, even if they weren't, you know, terribly affected, but they remember. So they probably hear that a lot from their parents, everything else, just in storytelling, everything else. In the Republic, though, I've seen it happen a few times, and I've been really kind of shocked by it. You know, be it a you know, a kind of nightclub or something like that, where there was a lot of young people, drinking, dancing, partying, and all stuff. And then some song would come on, not a rebel song, not in, but there'd be chants of like "Up the Rah," out of nowhere, and people would start jumping in without, I think, even knowing what they were screaming, just sort of,
Right.
And I think the fact that that became sort of that became the case is really scary. The other thing is, I think there's been a tendency, like all of us have, to look back at previous times with rose-colored glasses and romanticize it. And as Brexit was getting progressively messier and messier, we were doing some work with the Irish government, the Northern Ireland government, the Home Office, a bunch of different players. And one of the biggest concerns was that if because of Brexit they put up a hard border, all of a sudden that violates the peace process and everything else, that young people would just flood to it because they saw that as potentially like their patriotic duty and other things. And that's a different thing. And I think the fact that they don't know what it looks like for a bombing to go off. They don't know what it looks like for somebody just to get on a normal bus and have someone jump on the bus and shoot at you. They don't know that. So that's one of my concerns, is that the troubles have sort of been romanticized or sort of whitewashed over. And I think most people just sort of ignore it, but I've seen enough to make me worried.
Let me ask you this, Mark, because I thought about this for a while. One of the things that I always thought about is the unionist community. They showed such a loyalty to Britain over the years, and to me, the British government never showed that loyalty back. Like, to me, it's almost like it's their Vietnam. Like, I think if they had a choice to get out, they would get out. And do you think a lot of the unionists, the Protestant community, are unhappy with the British government, and that's a chance maybe to unite the country more and develop peace through that? Because I just I just see, like, the way the interviews that I've seen with some of the Protestant community over there, they're not happy with the British government.
No, I think a lot of people aren't happy with the British government.
Well,
But
that's true. I mean, they haven't
yeah,
given people a reason to be happy.
yeah, but I think in terms of the unionist committee or community, yeah, I think they were shortchanged on a lot of things, historically and recently. Again, going back to Brexit, even going back, throughout the 60s, 70s and stuff, You know, the Parliament probably had lots of use for, you know, the DUP and the UUP and others, to the extent that they were useful to them in terms of votes and other stuff. I don't think there was a real clear allegiance, things like that. And also too, I mean, it's, you know, geographically, it's easier to get your head around, you know, Wales, Scotland, England, and everybody just being next door to each other. Ireland, and especially Northern Ireland, were kind of like outposts almost. They were geographically disconnected, and I think that led to some stuff. But I think, you know, I think the unions have a lot of ground to be dramatically upset with what the cards they've been dealt, and what they were promised and didn't get, in terms of things. And I'm not talking, you know, I'm not talking preferential treatment. I'm just talking, you know, vote this way and your society will get, you know, government health care. You know, like, you don't have to go into the big ideological things. Just go into the nuts and bolts of
well, Mark, we know, you know, over the years, there's no doubt that community, the Protestant community, has gotten preferential treatment. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, as far as the police forces was always, you know, a very high percentage of unionist Protestant. Is that still true to this day, or has that changed?
No, that's correct. Yeah, and I think, you know, I think even over the last, you know, right since the end of World War II, even, I think that's just dramatically kind of shifted away. I think, you know, I couldn't give you the exact numbers right now, but I'm sure we can look them up. You know, the police force in Northern Ireland, I know, you know, a large chunk of it now is Catholic. If not, you know, I'm not going to give numbers or make them up, but it's nothing like this. But also with the economy changed dramatically. You know, the shipyards in Belfast, where they built the Titanic and everything else, gone. I mean, it's a museum now, but that was one of the biggest industries. Similar things in Derry and that part of the country. You know, major industrial things that are gone. And yeah, I mean, historically, sure, there was different opportunities given to different people. I think those days, that's pretty few and far between now. I think really the reality is that kind of everybody's in the same boat. And that's not because Catholics have taken more of the jobs or you know, anything else. It's just that things have changed so dramatically. You know, they've lost major industry, they've lost other things. And also too, you know, think about, like, you know, throughout the troubles, with even up until now, the amount of people that have immigrated to England or Scotland, massive, absolutely massive.
Right.
So I mean, that changes the whole dynamic of the place and who goes for what jobs and what jobs are available and everything else. But you know, no, I think it's a much more kind of equal society right now.
And talk a little bit about your research, you know, on a possible return to violence, and how do you prevent that, or at least limit it on a, you know, on a scale. I know we talked a little bit about that, but let's get into some specifics about, you know, the work you do. How do we prevent that?
No, it's a great question. And, you know, I think there's been kind of ebbs and flows of things over the last, you know, well, since the peace process. There's been little things, you know, I hate to sound like I'm putting all the blame and everything on Brexit. I'm not, but that was one of those things where it wasn't really thought out well. It was more of a gimmick that went wrong, in terms of people voting for it and other stuff, and a whole bunch of things that were, you know, not thought through had to be decided quick. And those were the kind of things I think that we were most concerned that could pull people back into violence, things that would actually kind of overturn the Good Friday Agreement. Or violate key parts of it. You know, people today don't know what it was like to go across the border back in the day, checkpoints and everything else. It's gone. But if all of a sudden now, you know, the British, you know, UK is not part of, or not allied anymore with the European Union, well, then we have to have something, so you can't just bring everything across the border. You need a border. How do you do that? Okay, we have to put a border in place. Well, that violates the Good Friday Agreement. You know, we put it out at sea, still border. So there's all these like weird things, like with Brexit and with certain other things over the years, that just, they could have been the spark to something. And I think if, I think if they had put up hard borders with Brexit, it's not a societal shift, but I think it just takes one person to blow up a border crossing. And for young people, and think again, like this, so we're talking about, young people in Northern Ireland. They're both in the same position, maybe struggling for jobs or other things. We do know the people who are, have more opportunities to go elsewhere, more opportunities for a job, more stability, other things, social, economic stuff, tend not to get pulled into extremism. If if you're in that situation where you don't have those things,
Right.
and somebody blows up a border station and says, "Come on, you're part of and then plays into all the romanticism and everything else, says you're part of the movement. Here we are, let's go. You can see how people would be pulled in.
Right.
So I think part of it is kind of shaping some of the narrative out there. To look at, we're doing our best to rebuild this place, and we're doing pretty good actually. Now there's going to be hiccups all the time. There's going to be political things. There's going to be all sorts of stuff that are messy and damaging. But there's ways we can work through those. And to be fair, I think all sides came together and really kind of came up with a very clean way to deal with Brexit and trade and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
They actually came together, put their heads together, and said, "Okay, this will work. Cool. Okay, let's do this." I think that reinstilling that kind of stuff, reinvigorating that kind of stuff is key. But yeah, I think that's it's one of those things. And I think it's not just something here. I mean, you see it elsewhere in the world.
And it's interesting. You mentioned that kids today don't understand the what it's like to go through a border crossing. My wife, her family, when she was young, they had exchange students from Ireland, and they occasionally would drive to go see relatives in New Jersey and New York, and they took these kids a couple times, and the kids were amazed that there was no stop. They didn't have to stop at the border between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. They weren't going to get searched. They weren't, no one was going to question them and ask them what they were doing and why they were going there. And it's something I think that, with all the differences we do have in our country, it's still one of those freedoms that we have that, we take that for granted.
Yeah.
We can go anywhere we want to go, really, and nobody's going to stop you. And except for the TSA, but other than that, I think we have it pretty good. And it's just stuff that, again, I think we take that for granted, and it's things that that happen in other countries that don't happen here. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. A lot of good stories like that from those kids, those exchange students.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is part of the reason why, Brexit was such a disappointment and hassle and everything else. If you're from Dublin and you've got an EU, you're a member of the EU, you can drive from France to Germany there's no hassle. If you don't have that EU passport or British passport, yeah, you got to go through customs at every single stop. And think about the impacts of that over the long term. But especially you're right, after in the Troubles and everything else. I mean, it was, this was serious business, going through a border crossing. It was
Sure.
Scary stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Sean, you had asked me what if I was going to write an empathy essay.
Yeah.
What would I write it about? And it occurred to me, it's the simplest answer. My son has dyslexia. I think kids with learning disabilities, that's what I would write about. These are kids that they're just kids. They're just like every other kid, except they need a little bit, of help when it comes to reading or learning or, understanding things. And, it's something that, like I said, my son has it. My mom works with kids who have dyslexia, and, they don't want sympathy. They don't want, anybody to feel sorry for them. They just, they need you to understand that maybe it takes them a little bit longer. Their brain works a little bit differently when it comes to reading, and it's not something that they can cure. It's not something there's a cure for. They just have to learn how to adjust to that and how to, live their lives knowing that they see things a little bit differently than everybody else, literally see things differently than everybody else. And their brain has to adjust, and may take a little bit extra time. But I think that's, Sean, that's the direction I would go.
Good one, Belly. That's good.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
So, Mark, I haven't been to Belfast and Derry in probably over 10 years. Would I recognize it today, or how much has it changed in that period?
Well, you definitely recognize it because both are such kind of historic cities, and then their
Right.
layout and stuff like that. But, I'm always amazed, like, and they've been gone quite a while, thankfully. But, if you go to Belfast, the city center, there's the beautiful government building and courthouse and everything's gorgeous, architecture and stuff. Forever that was surrounded by blast walls and barricades.
Right.
Those are gone, gone.
Right.
Places like the Europa Hotel, which is the most bombed hotel in Europe, no sign of any kind of security.
Right.
But, you would still see the Peace Wall, which is scary, creepy a bit. That's still there. As you go into the different neighborhoods, the one thing I've noticed is they've all always been really active in doing murals on the side of buildings.
Right.
And the one thing I've noticed that I think is really cool is, during the Troubles, right after the Troubles, almost all the murals were like a statement. They were they're about motivating the public. They're about making a statement. The vast majority of them now are like historical representations, maybe of people that were local heroes on either side or whatever. Their story is on there, or like historical events or other things. But they're not nearly like they used to be in your face. Like, all right, you ready to pick a fight? Okay, here's the murals for. Now it's very, I've seen that in Derry. I've seen that elsewhere. So I think those kind of things are important. I think that's a subtle messaging that the more we're exposed to it, the more we start saying us and them and all that kind of stuff. Certainly as you go to Derry, you go up around the city walls and elsewhere, the days of watchtowers and all the things that used to be there are gone, which is nice. It's been quite a long while actually since you would have seen it, but you don't see patrols anymore, things like that. So it's, there's a lot of things that makes it look like you're just going to another part of, especially if you're in Derry, it's like going to another part of Ireland. If you're in Belfast, the architecture and stuff is a little more like, Liverpool or Reading or London, so you feel like you're kind of in maybe more in the English countryside or whatever. But I think those are kind of big dramatic differences. I also tend to see you're talking about demographics before, especially Belfast, but Derry as well. They're becoming much more diverse. So you're seeing people from different parts of the world. You're seeing different cultures and other things popping up in terms of food and music and other stuff. So, you wouldn't have seen that before as well. I think that's a cool side of a growing kind of thriving society.
Right. And we've kept you a long time, Mark. This has been fantastic. But I have one question. This is going to be an interesting one. So let's get back to empathy here.
Okay.
And you know me pretty well. And I'm Irish heritage and my dad.
Yeah.
And I still have a lot of hard feelings towards the British. For what's been done in Ireland and in the British government and 800 years of oppression. And also, on this podcast, we talk a lot about JFK, and he had a disdain for colonialism too. And we talk a lot about what the British did in Africa and other places around the world with colonialism. So what do you say to me? How do I deal with those feelings, and how do I empathize with the British and more specifically the British government? Because, I'm not talking about I have friends from England and stuff, but I'm talking about the British government. How do I deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're right. I mean, I think a lot of our governments are scandalous and complete scandalous.
No, including this government.
Of course. And I think we do a lot of colonialism, just called a different thing to different places.
Exactly. Imperialism. Yeah.
Yeah. But, how to get past it. I mean, I think part of it is, and you're saying it already, is, I'm talking about the government here. I'm talking about, how many tens of millions of people live in the UK. Okay.
Right.
1,000th of 1% are in government running the place. Like not some conspiracy theory, right? But just, you know what I mean? Like,
No, you're right.
a small elite class, kind of like same could be said here.
Same here.
And I think, you know, through the work I've been doing in Northern Ireland and stuff, I think I've been really fortunate. I got a much deeper understanding of a lot of things. You know, I've gotten to hear people's stories of things, and not sad stories, but stories of pride, of other things. And that's cool. I think the more we can embrace that, I think, you know, much as we were talking about during the peace process and everything else, we got more in common than we don't. You know, governments are going to do what they're going to do. I think it's up to citizens to take a fight, you know, pick a fight in a good way, you know, and keep them accountable and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, I think a lot of the events over the last, you know, 10 years or so, the pandemic, Brexit, and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I think a lot of people in Britain are very, see a lot more protests of people coming out trying to hold the government accountable for things like healthcare and things like jobs and how you're going to take care of the old and sick and you know, the human conditions we have to face. And I think all of those that I've seen have come from a place of, you know, love, compassion, whatever else, just for their fellow citizens, their families, and other things. Not about who's taken what from what and all this kind of stuff we heard over the years. And I think, you know, you mentioned you got friends from England and stuff like that. I think the more we can, you know, be around people, the more we realize, okay, this certainly is governments. We're not agreeing that this isn't people. And that's, you know, that's a big thing.
Big thing. And I think on this podcast, Mark, we talk a lot of negativity on the U.S. government. That's probably 90% of our episodes, right, Billy?
Yeah, you can say that.
Absolutely. No, I think there's, you know, we got no room to be pointing fingers elsewhere.
Oh no.
You know, and I think, but again, I think I keep coming back to the idea that, you know, most of my life in my world is, you know, small amount of people I see every day and hang out in my wife, my friends, people I see at my favorite pub, whatever. I mean, it's, you know, it's, I don't want to get caught up in the craziness of pointing fingers all over the world. And I certainly think I'll be right at the forefront of disagreeing with, of things, and I'll certainly be vocal about those, and I'll certainly spend money and protest and whatever else. But, you know, most of my life's right here, and it's around people that are, you know, that I care about the people in the place, and we'll do good things together.
Well, you're doing great work, Mark. Keep it up. I mean, just tremendous work, you know, and just impressive stuff. And, you know, let's, you know, wrap it up. Is there anything, you know, that we haven't discussed that you want to end this with? Anything you want to go over?
No, I think just, you know, I mean, thank you guys. You know, it's amazing job you're doing, amazing important work you're doing, and thanks for having me be part of it.
We'd love to have you back, buddy.
Anytime. Hey, you know, I'm never doing anything on Sundays. Come and get me. But I would just, you know, kind of keep in mind like this idea of, you know, this idea of empathy and showing it everything else. Again, it's not some touchy-feely giving out hugs and kisses. What I would say is, and it takes effort to practice it, and but it's a really important thing for us as individuals. And just keep trying to practice it. Before you know, somebody cuts you off on the road, and the first thing you want to do is go strangle them. You know, kind of put yourself in their head, like, are they running to the hospital, or are they doing whatever? Just keep like, what could they possibly be doing these things? And if we can understand people a little more, now maybe give each other a break. Things will be better. So,
excellent points.
All right, guys. Thanks a million.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. Talk to you soon.
All right, buddy.
Bye. That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.